species and for other sites have all been informed by our work with farmers on the Shannon Callows. So it's been a really, really important learning study site for people working in biodiversity.
Katrin, I'm going to ask you to tie it up.
That's it. Done.
Deadly. Listen, sorry now for cutting you so abruptly. Just want to try keep this. That was deadly. Thanks a million. Plenty of questions for you coming in there as well, so you'll be busy when we tie up. Jim, are you there?
I am.
Excellent, excellent, excellent.
And I'll try and share the screen.
Yeah, you work on that. So finally, we have Jim Ryan. He's a veteran wetland ecologist, formerly of the NPWS, before retiring a few years back. Jim now volunteers his expertise to the Community Wetlands Forum and the groups and various things, and also enjoys interpretive dance.
People are laughing, but yeah.
Ricky's unreliable as usual, but there you go.
Thanks, Jim. We can see that. That's deadly. Yeah.
You can. Okay, good. Now, look, basically, my connection to Clara, I want to say, this is what you're looking at now is the SAC, Clara SAC with Clara Town up at the top of the picture, and the road through the bog, the Rahan Road, going through the middle of the bog, north-south. So basically, at one stage, this is sort of back when practically Tyrannosaurus Rex was ruling the world, and I was starting out in NPWS, everyone knew that Irish bogs were plentiful, there was no problem, didn't need to worry about them. But then a Dutchman came along and gave me a kick in the bum and said, all my study sites are disappearing. So I realized then I hadn't been doing my job and started to get interested in bogs. And one of the first ones we had any kind of major success with was Clara. So I'm just going to give you a little short potted history of Clara for the last 200 years. If you look, there's four maps there, one from 1809, 1838, 1910, and 2006. So if you look at the 1809, that's more or less the original extent of the bog that's shown there. And you can see the Rahan Road that's going down through it. And I think I'll just try to deal with this as a series, the road, the turf cutting, and the Bord-na-Mona drainage, which you can see in the 2006 map. So starting off with the 1809 one, the Rahan Road, there was a road put through the bog, probably to connect to the Grand Canal to the south. And that road would have had drains along the side of it. Now, over time, those drains made the bog shrink. And what you now have is your road sitting in a 5-meter deep valley through the middle of the bog. And that's all because the drains were taking the water out of the bog. And you can see, if you look, that the protective drainage system parallel to the road gets more complex over time. If you then look at the turf cutting, so in 1809, the site was pretty much intact. Not a huge amount of change to 1838. 1910, there was about 10+% of the bog had been cut away. And then 2006, you had essentially over 50% of the bog had been cut away. So most of the turf cutting on Clara has happened in the 20th century. Just then to deal with the very intensive drainage system that you see on the eastern side of the bog in the 2006 map, that was put in 1984 by Bord na Móna, part of their kind of preliminary drainage system that they do when they're starting to develop or exploit bogs. So there was about, when that went in, there was a lot of shock from both some of the local people, some of the Irish nature conservation organisations, and the Dutch Foundation for the Conservation of Irish Bogs. And they made such a ruckus that the government decided that Bord na Móna shouldn't proceed any further with their drainage, and the National Parks and Wildlife Service was then able to acquire all of Bord na Móna's property on the bog in 1986. And from then, the efforts to try and do something about it began. So you can see then we have the bog has had its little vicissitudes over time, but despite that, it's still one of the largest and best remaining raised bogs in the country, which also is a story about all the raised bogs in the country, really. But because raised bogs are so rare in Europe, there is a lot of interest in conserving them right throughout the whole of Western Europe. And out of all the bogs in Western Europe, Ireland had the most intact ones, but it only had 1% of its original area. So Ireland was good with 1%. You can imagine what the rest of the countries throughout Western Europe were like. So it's important for that from a habitat perspective. It also, just as well as beside the bog, because it's a big bog, it had these areas where you got more water running off the surface of the bog than is normal on a smaller bog. And those areas have a different kind of vegetation. They're called soaks, and they support a more fenny type vegetation or bog woodland. But what Clara is also very important for is that it's an internationally significant scientific site, because since basically the end of the 1980s, you've had now 32 years of research, more or less continuous, on the bog. Originally, that research was all about trying to find out how the bog works and how you could maintain the wet areas on the bog and how you could restore wet areas on the bog. So, we're sort of right up there with the best of them in relation to the work that was done there. And just why were other people interested in coming? Well, basically because their bogs were so badly destroyed that they, if they started to do work on them, they wouldn't know whether they were actually heading in the right or the wrong direction. So that's why a lot of people have come to Ireland over the years, and the town has benefited from their activities. A couple of minutes there,
Jim.
Okay, so just to say that all the work that was done on Clara has led to new techniques being developed, both to survey and to assess bogs and to develop restoration methods for the bogs. So it's a very important site from that perspective. And as a result of the work there, work has been also undertaken on about 60 more raised bogs throughout the country, but no bog has been restored completely. In Clara, I just need to say this, we have a target of approximately 180 hectares of active raised bog, which we're supposed to achieve. We're not achieving that, not because we haven't done the right thing, if you like, but because we have some of the turf cutting intercepted very sort of free draining ground underneath the bog, and that is on the western side of the bog, draining a very, very large area, and you've had the bog surface has gone down by over a meter in places in a decade. So we have our major problems on the site. The only way to solve that problem will be to build to fill in part of the cutover and to build a dam, which will cost about 2 to 4 million. So we have huge problems there. This is the nature of Clara. I mean, in other bogs, we've had much more success. But this is the nature of Clara. Because it's complex, it's more difficult to manage. Just one last slide. They're now starting to do different kinds of work on the cutover. This will be similar to what will be done on the Bord-na-Mona sites, where you're getting a whole load of bunding going in to try and hold shallow water out on the cutover and allow it to start developing into raised bog once more. Look, thanks for listening to me, and I hope you've gained something from the talk.